you're not actually stopping to give yourself space when you're thinking about product strategy and visions and saying like, hey, let me actually go back and reevaluate what the market's doing. Let me get back in touch with my customers. Let me really deeply empathize with them and let me take some time to build that strategy, let that sink in and hypothesize about what could be. And that is one big mistake I see people do when creating any product strategy, whether it's really innovative or not, is they just rush into what we think is next instead of taking the time to like deeply understand what I call like the current state. And that current state picture is like, what are the problems? Where are we winning? Where are we losing? What's the market doing? But also the internal metrics that we would look at in like product ops of what are our most profitable segments of customers, who's churning, why are they churning? Like getting all that information takes so much time. But if you don't know where you are in relation to like where the market's moving, what your competitors are doing, what your customers really want, how their behaviors are evolving, all of that stuff, how could you possibly set your vision for what's to come?
Welcome to the Product Tea with Leah. I am your host, Leah Darin, and we are about to spill the tea with the best from tech about product growth and senior leadership topics. Ladies and gentlemen, the product management equivalent of a Swiss Army knife if it also came with an MBA from Harvard and the ability to turn corporate behemoths into agile ninjas. This woman wrote 2 books on product ops while the rest of us were still trying to figure out how to mute ourselves on Zoom. Board member? Check. Podcast host who actually makes product strategy sound cool? Double check. Professional transformer of Fortune 500 companies into customer-obsessed machines? You bet your Jira backlog she is. But now some people claim that her flawless camera setup and an encyclopedic knowledge of outcome-oriented roadmaps are proof that she's actually an AI prototype. To which I say, if big tech created a product management ChatGPT, it would absolutely steal her haircut and the ability to explain why SAFe sucks without once glancing at notes. Well, if the actual Melissa Perri is watching this, blink twice if you're actually a hologram from 2030 here to save us all from our belt traps. Anyways, whether she's human or the world's most advanced product leadership algorithm, one thing is clear. When she talks about product ops, even the Scrum Agile trainers are sitting up and start to take notes. Welcome to the Product Tea, Melissa Perri. It's nice to have you here. How are you doing this morning?
Great, Leah. Thanks for that amazing introduction.
Thank you very much. It's very nice to see you. Hey, did I forget anything, or is this a perfect description of your personality and everything that you do?
It's spot on. Absolutely spot on.
That is exactly what it is. Well, Melissa, what do people get wrong about you once they get to know you?
Oh, where you think of perception-wise before they know me, and then they know me, and they're like, oh, that was...
Whatever.
What'd you get wrong about me before you got to know me?
So I thought that you were actually quite unapproachable, but once we got to know each other, I think it was about 2 years ago, you turned out to be the most extrovert person that I know in my circles, which is, you're very nice to be around. I mean that in the sense of like, you know, like you're just ready to go in every restaurant and just like drag everyone around you with you. And you have no inhibition to get new people to know, right? And I do, right? Like I'm an introvert. I cannot do that. You're one of the kindest extroverts that I know. And I mean that in the most positive way and senses. But yeah, it actually surprised me.
I don't feel like you're so much of an introvert though, but...
No, with you, I can geek out on stuff, right? But like when there's people around the table where I'm just like, yeah, let's talk about stuff.
Well, I'm the same way. That's why I like love going to product conferences. And I'm just, let's go like hang out and talk at product conferences. It's so much fun because then we could just geek out about stuff. And then we talk about everything else under the sun too. But it's like a way in. I will say I get nervous in crowds of people I don't know when there's no context. So I'm not good at like talking to strangers. I won't be the person who sits at a bar and like talks to a stranger.
You don't? Okay. But you seem to be the one that is always dragging everybody out of the house. Hey, come on, let's do something. You know, like, let's go to this restaurant. Let's try this particular whiskey. And yeah.
Yeah. And I like to organize things when it's around events or conferences, or I know friends will be there. It'll be fun.
Yeah, you're really good at that. I think you would be my go-to person. But unfortunately, we're living too far ahead or like apart from each other. Maybe that's going to change in the future, but we're not going to talk about that. So what are we talking about? Well, a topic that nobody's talking about these days, which is called AI. AI stands for artificial intelligence. No, we're talking about product strategy and one part in there, because you're talking about this quite a lot. You also talk about product ops quite a lot. So AI is this thing that is giving us a lot of value. It's also making everybody lose their shit because everybody thinks they're losing their actual jobs and so forth. And you have released a new course, which is about product strategy on the Product Institute. It will be in the show notes. How are these two coming together? Isn't it just easy? Like we're just slapping AI on something and then it kind of comes together? Like, how do you think about this right now?
Yeah, I've been working with a lot of companies who are trying to figure out how to incorporate AI. And it's interesting because I'm hearing anytime somebody tells me they're using AI, I'm like, oh, how? Please tell me how. And I found that there's a couple different camps. Like we'll see people using AI in their internal processes. So it'll be like, oh, I'm using it to help me write. I use it to help me write as well. Like, great, fantastic. A little bit of productivity there. I hear about people using it to help like synthesize research notes, things like that. Cool. Then I hear on this other side, oh, we're putting AI into our product. And I think there's like a push from, board members, from investors, from a lot of people to be like, hey, let's put some AI on there because it's the next big thing. Same thing we had with like crypto and blockchain and all that stuff. And when I'm looking at organizations trying to figure out how to incorporate AI, I think they're getting stuck right now. Corporations, smaller companies, anybody, right? Like they're getting stuck in this war of like, how do we actually use it well? And I think there's two facets that I've been seeing people do. And there's places where I've seen people do it well and I've seen people do it not well. So when I think about like doing product strategy and incorporating it into what we do to sell to customers, right, to solve their problems, one mistake I see a lot of people making is they're just kind of like slapping AI on things just to be like, I have a label and it's AI, right? Great example is like when Figma first came out with their AI tool, they had one in the Figma, and I don't know if they've done anything more recently with it, but they had one in the Figma brainstorming Canvas app that they have. And you could just be like, I need a template for, a brainstorm session. And it would just drop a Kanban board or like a chart on it. And it wasn't very good. It didn't really get you to where you needed to go when it was doing that. I'm like, I probably could have scrolled through a template library and gotten to something better. And to me, like, what problem are we trying to solve with AI? Are we just doing it to check a box and say we have AI in Figma, or are we doing it to get people to a further position better, right? Like to get to where they need to go faster, right? Making that canvas so you didn't have to think through it. And to me, like the solution was poorly executed at that time, right? It wasn't giving people what they wanted. It wasn't giving people what they needed there. And I see that a lot in how people are thinking about AI. And then I think there's this facet of companies that are succeeding with AI where they look at it as we still need to solve our customers' problems, but AI is giving us a way to do that in ways that we've never been able to do it before. So whether it's LLMs and we're able to digest a huge amount of qualitative data and be able to present it or understand it in ways that we haven't been able to do, before, or whether it's not even LLM space, like AI for quantitative stuff, we're able to do that. I've seen it with like integrations, bringing integrations in, being able to digest it back into LLMs. Like they're kind of thinking of it as, here's the problem. We know this problem deeply. Now we have a technology to be able to solve it in a different way. How can we use AI to solve that problem better than other people have done it before? So in that camp, where I think people are doing it really well, is a company called Digits. And I keep using this as my example, but what's cool about Digits is they are an accounting software, a bookkeeping software out there for small businesses. And like I'm a small business, I run everything on QuickBooks. And I vehemently hate QuickBooks. It says that it has like smart tagging and stuff like that. It doesn't. But QuickBooks makes you be a bookkeeper to use it. And to be fair, like a lot of bookkeepers do use QuickBooks. So I know part of their market's there. But they know I'm a small business. I said I was a small business when I came in there. I didn't say I was an accountant. They make me reconcile all of my books. I don't know how to reconcile my bank statements to my books, right? So I have to hire a bookkeeper to do that in QuickBooks, to actually use QuickBooks. They make you add these journal entries in complicated ways, managing these different things to get reports that you want to see. And what really pisses me off about QuickBooks is like they have my banks hooked up to it. They can reconcile my accounts for me. They see what I spend. Why do I have to download my statements and do it manually myself, right? To close my books, to do that. Digits looked at it and said, hey, why do small businesses need to be a bookkeeper to do their books? They know what they spend money on. They can classify it, but we know all the accounting rules. So we'll just plug it into our system. Like you tell us what you're spending money on. We're pulling it in from everything. We have your bank accounts. We'll reconcile it for you. And I'm like, yeah, that's what I wanted, right? Like, why do I have to be a bookkeeper to do my books? Like, what the rules are. Just get the rules, right? So their AI goes through all the rules, figures out which ones apply to you, tags it and says, does this look correct? Do you think you spent money on this? And you're like, yeah. And then they're able to plug into all different systems and integrate and be able to classify those things in a better way. So to me, I'm looking at this going, okay, now we took a technology, we took AI, we took better technology, we took integrations, right? And we flipped it on its head to solve the same problem. And the problem is I need to be able to manage my books as a small business, not necessarily a bookkeeper. And QuickBooks took the approach of I'm going to make it extremely hard and like the old workflows that bookkeepers had to do. And I'm never going to deviate from that. And Digit said, why do people have to do that now? Right? Like we have the technology to make that simpler. Like, can't we just make this better? So I don't think this just applies to AI. I do think it applies to like any new technology, right? Of how we're looking at it, how we're trying to use it. But to me, that's such a great example of how do we solve problems that still exist for our customers in much better ways with new technology that's out there. And I think every product leader needs to start thinking about that at its core in its product strategy. It's not just about slapping AI on to say like, hey, we could do this thing, but like, does it solve this problem 10 times better than what we had before? Can it solve this problem in a new way that we've never been able to do before? And I think that's where you get to these super innovative companies that are doing great things with AI baked in.
So there's a lot of interesting stuff in there. And first of all, this episode is not sponsored by QuickBooks. As you
It is not.
Digits, you can still reach out if you want to sponsor this episode. But in any case, I think there's an interesting thing going on there on this example that you gave, because why is it not just possible for like, let's just put our CPO head on and we say that, hey, like we're now the CPO of QuickBooks. Why is QuickBooks not able to do this transition themselves? And I think one of the major mistakes that most companies do in this sense is that when you're starting to add AI to a workflow that makes, in the example that you just gave, that is crossing ICPs, because you are now the target customer and not your bookkeeper anymore, then it doesn't help if you just improve parts of your product with AI, because the bookkeeper doesn't care about it in this way. The bookkeeper has different demands, right? Like what they care is whether they can actually bill the hours towards Melissa afterwards, right? Whereas you don't. So like, I think whenever you're crossing ICPs with your solutions on the same workflows, which is absolutely valid, you need to have a different product for it or a different sub-product, like maybe, I don't know, QuickBooks, Melissa, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. And that's like the strategy too. I work with a lot of really large companies and smaller companies too, right? And I think one big fear though, as well, is disrupting themselves, right? They're very worried about disrupting their existing business to innovate. So they get scared of the potential of alienating the bookkeepers. It's true. Like we don't want to alienate the bookkeepers, but you could totally shoot out a different product under another brand than QuickBooks. You could call it something else and just be like, this is different, and start that over on the side, right? And people would gravitate towards it. Now you've got both, because not everybody's going to want to do this completely themselves. There will still be people who want bookkeepers, right? That market's not going to close. But now you've got smaller businesses that can't afford bookkeepers. So now we can target that. So there are ways to like slice and dice it. And I do think though that a lot of companies get into this mode, like I said, like where they're afraid to disrupt themselves, or they go, oh, we can't do that because we have these customers over here, or we can't do that because we have like X, Y, and Z, and this is how we've always done it. Or they have so many people and such a legacy system and something that they built over such a long time that it is hard to pivot, right? It's hard to change course or rethink these things. And to be fair, that's true, because if you got like 10,000 engineers working for you, it's kind of hard to like just be like, hey, we're all going to go in this direction right now. So you have to put that out there, systematically test it, right? Make sure it's the right direction, and then start to carve it off. But I also see people not investing in like innovation teams or pulling teams out to actually do that. And I think it's that fear, or that you're so caught up in the way that we've always done it or the way that we're looking at it, you're not looking at what's ahead, right? You're not actually stopping to give yourself space when you're thinking about product strategy and visions and saying like, hey, let me actually go back and reevaluate what the market's doing. Let me get back in touch with my customers. Let me really deeply empathize with them, and let me take some time to build that strategy, let that sink in, and hypothesize about what could be. And that is one big mistake I see people do when creating any product strategy, whether it's really innovative or not, is they just rush into what we think is next instead of taking the time to like deeply understand what I call like the current state. And that current state picture is like, what are the problems? Where are we winning? Where are we losing? What's the market doing? But also the internal metrics that we would look at in like product ops of what are our most profitable segments of customers, who's churning, why are they churning? Like getting all that information takes so much time. But if you don't know where you are in relation to like where the market's moving, what your competitors are doing, what your customers really want, how their behaviors are evolving, all of that stuff, how could you possibly set your vision for what's to come, right? How could you possibly set a strategy for what's next?
This was such an interesting point as well with CJ Gustafson that I had with a completely different topic where he said that, look, if the recession or like the market is going to take a downturn and the majority of your clients, even if you're a software, company, if the majority of your clients are retailers, you are now a retail company.
Mm-hmm.
That is what you are right now, right? So like you need to understand exactly this particular topic really, really well. I have a hypothesis, by the way, why I think that companies do not know, or like most product leaders, so to speak, or CEOs, how to set up these innovation teams, like that are basically building a little bit in the basement on that kind of stuff. Because I made the same mistake as well. I think if you want to do this, it's not enough to just have a position in a strategy where you say like, oh, now we're going to build this new product. You need to detach that team from the processes, from the money, and also from the tech stack.
Yep.
This was the biggest mistake that I've done also at Sunrise, where I made too many concessions. I said like, yeah, let's build it on top of what we already have. You'd have to completely detach this. The money needs to be safe. They cannot be in the tech stack, like integrating it into the latest Adobe shitty CRM stack that they have, because it slows everything down. You're just loading up the negative shit from your corporate culture, and now you shoehorning it onto this particular team.
Yep.
But I think that's what's mostly going to go wrong in there.
Yeah, big time. But then I've also seen that fail as well. So like I've seen that succeed really well. And I agree, like if you have a legacy tech stack and everybody's complaining about it, you can't innovate on top of it, and you're rethinking your product like from the ground up, with so many of the tools that are out there today, it could be worth it to just rebuild it, right? Or not rebuild it, or build something new and then go back and figure out how to integrate it. And I think with a lot of the AI tools out there, like Lovable, Bolt, all these things, like you can get to a proof of concept pretty quickly. And that's cool to me. I don't think that's stable code. Like you're going to have to rebuild that in the future, but it's something enough to test it, right? With some real data, which is cool. So if you're doing the right research, you're getting out there, you're testing it, you stand up this team, make sure it works, and you can pull that team out of there to do that good work, that's going to like unlock, I think, a lot of space and a lot of innovation. On the flip side, where I see teams fail with that is when they pull that team out, give them a mandate, but then also don't hold them accountable for any objectives, goals, or long-term vision of the company, right? So it's like you have to have a super well-defined vision for where you want the company to go, right? To tie that team back to it, to anchor it. Because otherwise they're going to be building in isolation, but it's never going to be profitable. It's never going to actually like marry back to the goals. So I've seen that fail on super large scales where we've kept these teams going. We're like, okay, we're going to do the process right. Like the team was stood up more to do a process rather than to achieve goals, right? And because it was an innovation team, people weren't holding them accountable like they would other teams to like good metrics, to goals, to outcomes. And instead they were just letting them run. So when they were going out and building stuff, like the technology looked nice, but it wasn't being used, right? It wasn't being used, or it wasn't being profitable, or it wasn't hitting like the right goals. And they were spending way too much time doing that. So I do think like it's the right move if you're in a big legacy company with these systems to pull it out. But then what are you going to hold them accountable for, right? Like what is the purpose of that team? It's not just innovation, right? And I've seen a lot of corporations just be like, that's the innovation team. I'm like, okay, but what's the innovation team doing? They're innovating. And you're like, oh, okay, cool. On what? Like,
yeah, they have the colorful meeting rooms and the plushies in the side where you can sit in and just be really cool. Yeah.
And I think it's important that if we do pull a team out there too, and they don't do what we thought it should do, right? We kill it. Like we just say, all right, that product didn't work. Like shut it down and let's move on to something else, right? Or a different bet. Right?
Yeah. And by the way, when Melissa says kill it, she doesn't mean the team. She means the idea. Okay. The project, not the entire team. Just saying. Okay. Go ahead. Sorry.
But yeah, like let's pivot. Let's move on to something else, right? Like don't be afraid, sunk cost fallacy. Like don't be afraid to say like, hey, that didn't work. Let's see what else is out there. What did you learn? What can we reflect on? How do we bake that into what our next move is?
I really like this point that you also said. And I think the way that to do this is that you can say that, hey, you can use our distribution to get initial clients because that's what you should do in a corporation, right? So like we're forcing a little bit our distribution power behind you. That's totally fine. But you're going to be evaluated like a startup almost. That's what Mozilla is doing, by the way. Like they're evaluating them through stages. So that was a very interesting episode on that one as well. So I really like this. Yeah, like hold them accountable. It's not enough to just be innovative until the end of time.
Yep.
But to your point then, okay, so we say that, or like we have the sentiment, now speaking more from the perspective of a board member myself, where, okay, we understand there is AI right now happening in the market and we have some kind of legacy software that is just like, it starts to feel old, but we're not really sure because it's not that obvious whether AI can do something. So we're not talking about something where we Think about, for instance, customer support, which is a very, very obvious case. It actually is better with AI and so forth. I think often the fear from boards is that, hey, we do not want to miss the train. So when is it time and how should you do this in terms of like evaluating whether AI is the correct answer to kind of put it into your product strategy? Or like, how can we minimize and manage the risk when you're not sure? Even if the outcome would be like, hey, AI is maybe not the right horse to bet on right now, but we still want to kind of figure out whether we should.
Yeah, I sit on boards too. And I feel like in our conversations, the board is always pushing for a couple things. It's like, hey, can we use AI to be more innovative and solve this problem in a different way? And I do think there is something on there. If your company, right, if it's private, and I'm assuming we're going to talk about PE and VC backed companies here when we're talking about these boards. Like if it is private, there's also this connotation like how far are you in your hold cycle, right? If you're looking for an exit soon, I find that the investors are also like, hey, if things are getting valued higher because they are AI or they're using AI right now, like, is there a way that we can leverage this, especially when we go to market for a sale, right? Or when we're looking for another round or whatnot. And I do think that's one consideration. So it's like, is there a way that we can do this to help position ourselves because we could catch this wave and get a higher valuation if we do have these things? And if you're talking about that as a board, like I would just acknowledge it. Be like, I think like I'm seeing companies that do this in this category or, priced at a multiple 3 times higher than these. So like this could behoove us to actually look at it. At least we're just laying it on the table of like what we're looking at. And we're also taking into account why those companies are being valued at that point. So maybe it's just a label, maybe it's just a hype market cycle, but that's letting us know like where we're at. So if you're really far in the cycle, it could say like, hey, should we incorporate this? Is there a way we could do this just to like catch that train? The other side of it, I think, is the fear of disruption, right? With those technologies as well, it's like if everybody can move so much faster, which they can with AI, right? Or if they can, lower their costs and do that, if we're not taking advantage of it now, where are we going to be compared to our competitors in 2 to 3 years, right? If they're doing it. So what are we looking at? Like, is this right for our market? In those conversations, I think there's the question of like, is AI a technology that can help us solve the problems that we want to solve, right? Or solve new problems that we didn't think we could solve for our existing customer base or a new customer base, right? That's adjacent to it in ways that, were not possible before. And I do think there's good pressure if you're encouraging the product team and, the CEO to look at those things from a board perspective, if they're not looking at them already, right? There's good ways to like bring that up. Then I think there's bad ways to just be like, you're not using AI, right? And that type of pressure is not great if the team has actually thoroughly explored it. So 2 different sides of the conversation there. I do think every team right now should be looking at it as, is this a technology that can help us solve problems better? And that's the conversation that we should be having. Is this a technology that we can harness to solve problems better, whether they're internal problems for the business or problems for our customers? And if we're not having conversations at that level, then we're just slapping some solutions on top of stuff and trying to like do things for reasons that are not known, right? So my like first rule whenever we're asking for stuff on a board or if I'm like, navigating these conversations with investors is like, why are we asking this, right? Like, what's the point? Are we afraid of disruption? Are we afraid that people are not forward looking enough? Are we afraid of, exit multiples? Like just lay on the table what we think this might help us with. And then let's go back and actually address those problems and see if this is the right solution for them.
So I'm 100% with you. And I usually think that it really is this fear of disruption most of the time. So let's dig into this a little bit because I want to split this up into an easy part and then a hard part. So the easier part, at least for me, is that I always kind of have the stance of like, show me first something that pisses our customers off right now.
Good question.
Which is one part of the problem, right? Because otherwise there's no problem to solve. However, and this is an interesting one. So like, let's take the example that you have from before, like from QuickBooks versus Digits and so forth. So you might be pissed off by collating your statements all the time, like you need to kind of download it from the bank and so forth and whatnot. And in an interview, you would tell me this, right? And then I kind of know about it and then I can design for it. That's okay. But I think one area that is really hard with AI is that there are problems where the people kind of just accept that it's shitty.
Exactly. They accept that this has always been the way. I was going to bring that up. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, exactly. So I'm going to pause here, but like, I think that corner is super fucking difficult to navigate on a strategy because you also need to recognize it and you cannot just go simply by show me something that the customers are pissed off about.
Yeah. And it's also to me, those are where things get really interesting, right? Like that's the latent needs thing. Like people don't even realize they have this problem. One, super hard to tackle because when people are not aware that they have problems, they're not necessarily looking for solutions, right? So you're not going to get like a crazy influx of people immediately, but you have to show them why it's a problem for them. It's like a problem they never saw. In those cases too, I'm working with a company that's actually doing one of those right now. And I can't talk about it a lot, but we'll talk about one day when this all works out. But it was one of those things when we were thinking of like, how can we use AI to solve this problem, where I went, my God, this is like genius because technology can do all of these things, but we're so used to doing the workflow in this other way. And this actually would solve a huge problem that I have. I just don't accept that it's frustrating for me. Like if you asked me about it, I wouldn't know like to bring it up, but it becomes a frustration every single day in the way that we do things. And now with these technologies, we can actually skip it. But it's one of those things too, where we're like, you have to see it to understand it. And in that case, like what we're doing is building a small prototype that works and showing it to people. And it's almost like the Dropbox, right? Magic video type stuff. Like you have to see how it works. And then you're like, oh my God, I can't believe I lived without this. And I think when you're developing a product strategy like that, it's hard because it's not like you're just going to go ask your customers what problems they have. But that's where you really have to understand the behavior, right? And that's really where you get into ethnographic research and watching how people do things. And you have to flip your perception of the way that things have been done before into stuff that's radically new.
You know what I think it is? I've tried to formalize it at some point, and I wanted to know what Melissa thinks about it. So, like, if you think again, like, let's take again the QuickBooks thing because it doesn't really matter. So, when you're doing your accounts or your books or whatever, you have a workflow that is sort of some of the parts of your workflow are starting on a more recurring kind of period, right? And then one of them is like happening once a year. So, for instance, like submit the taxes and so forth. I am almost certain that if you kind of map this out, like what you're solving for the customers, and you really start to analyze, okay, so what is happening on a daily basis, you know, like for most products, and then we have things that are on a weekly and a monthly basis, discard all the shit that is weekly and monthly and focus on the mundane, simple, annoying stuff. One of the best products that I have seen on Reddit just today was a guy that made, it's not a coder at all, whatever, just a simple split the bill application that allows you to scan the check of your bill where, you know, like you're in the restaurant, right? And you have to kind of split the check. But it was so well done that me describing it is not like, you know, it's just so well done. It was just like so easy. Like, hey, this person here, and then you can now scan, and then you can use your Venmo and so forth. I think, honestly, for 99% of the companies in product strategy, also for the bigger ones, the proof is in the mundane, boring, recurring processes. It's not the flashy shit, you know, like, oh my God, AI can automate my face on LinkedIn.
Maybe a Lego.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
No, I agree. It's the stuff that we take for granted that we do every day. And to me, that's the most interesting things, right? And again, it gets back to like honing in on that stuff is hard, right? Because I think we also get into, I know I do for sure, like we get into this habit of, well, I've always done it that way and I have my process to do it now. So why would I take time to figure out how to automate it or take away this work, right? Like it's easy for me to do and I know how to do it. And I think people do this as well with their own processes. So like the boards that I sit on and also in some of the companies I work with, like there's a huge push for product managers, developers, everybody to like embrace AI, learn how AI can help them with their own workflows, right? To put it all together. It almost reminds me of like everybody's push to automate stuff with like Zapier before. But what can AI do to help you accelerate, to be more productive, to help you with the mundane things? And we get into this flow, I think, where we're like, well, I do this stuff every day. I have a process for doing it. If I take time out of my schedule or my day because I'm so busy to go learn all these things, then I'm going to have to like figure out how to automate it. Then I'm going to have to map this stuff. Now I'm going to have to take time out of doing it. And like, okay, maybe it'll marginally save me like an hour a day. Is that worth it? Right. And I think that's a mindset that we get into. So many people won't spend the energy going through those things, won't spend the time to actually like explore it and take advantage of it because it's just like, well, it's not super frustrating for me because I do it every day and I don't care. Right. But if you did do it and you went back and you applied it and you said, hey, this takes away actually 5 hours of my day, right? What could that be? And I think it's just this mental hurdle of that's just the way it is.
You know who I think has a really good grasp on this? Like, this episode is not sponsored by Superhuman, by the way, but like, you know who has a really good grip on this? It's Superhuman. Like, I don't know whether you're using their product.
I'm not using it yet, but I've heard amazing things.
They have a really good AI integration. The way that it works is this, right? So like, we all have AI already in Gmail and so forth, right? So like, drafting the emails and all that kind of crap. The problem is that I can already draft my emails technically. Like, let's say I want to write you an email and I want to make sure there's no spelling mistakes in there and so forth. I can already do that in ChatGPT and so forth. Like, so all this kind of stuff. The point is not that you can do it. It's just how efficient can you do it if you're doing it on a mundane level. So mundane level would be someone is writing me an email and I just want to give them a very quick reply that is official enough, professional enough, like 10, 20 times a day, whatever, right? So like, I don't know, like students for your course, what have you.
Mm-hmm.
The cool thing that they do is it's not the quality of the writing, right? It's not, they don't have an underlying LLM that is like better than anything else. But the cool thing is you can say like, hey, suggest me now a message to Melissa. And then it gives you always 5 options. Shorten it, make it more professional, make it longer, or, just the most common actions. I can still edit the stuff, right?
Yep.
Accept it or reject it. That's it. That's the kind of thing where I feel like AI is going into a really correct direction. And that's where people get it wrong. It's not about replacing workflows. It's about enhancing the 80% that suck about pretty much everything in our lives. I honestly do think so.
Yeah, absolutely. And I got in a conversation with like an investor a couple weeks ago where it was like a big push to get developers on a team to embrace AI, right? Because I think everybody's like, oh, we can work. We don't need to hire people if we could just replace productivity with AI. I also heard about, I forget where it was, but somebody was talking about how in the future, our teams are just going to be like a product manager and a developer. And I'm like, that's not going to be the case in most large organizations, right? Like you still have so much security and compliance stuff and all of these things. Like if you scale a massive backend system, which you're going to need in a large bank or anywhere like that, like I would love to get to a place where we have like a developer, a product manager, and like a designer, but I don't see that being realistic. I do think we can keep our teams lean, but if you think about it, there's always way too many things that every company needs to do. So we're never going to run out of like roadmap items. The idea is like, how do we get through those roadmap items faster and make sure they're the right roadmap items, right? To get the value out to customers faster. And I think we're thinking about productivity. So many people are thinking about it as like slashing heads. And I just think about it as going faster, right? To reach our goals. And then something else is going to come out as a problem. And then we're going to have to solve that problem. So I don't think some people are looking at the AI in the right way of thinking about it allows us to do more things, right? It allows us to do things faster rather than it allows us to cut heads.
Yeah.
It will help us save money at the end of the day because we won't have to hire 1 million people.
You're using the brutal metaphors again, cutting heads, killing people, killing teams.
Yeah, I don't know why I do that. I guess the English language is full of brutal things.
I have it too. We're putting boots on the ground and all that stuff. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
It's okay. But I do think like when we look at it as how do we harness AI to help our flows so we can get more value out to customers faster, right? That is a better lens to look at it.
Okay. You know what? You know whose fault this is? Safe and agile. And I'm going to tell you why. I started to hate everything that has to do with safe. And then I started to hate everything that has to do with Scrum. And now I'm actually on the boat with agile. Everybody's like, hey, Leah, you cannot mix up agile and Scrum. It's not the same thing. I'm like, okay.
Oh, those conversations I've been having for 15 years.
Exactly. I think you were hating on it earlier than me.
Yeah, I've been called the enemy of Scrum before by people in the agile space.
Oh my God, that makes you professionally so attractive. That is, it's amazing. No, so here's the thing. There is this idea that when a product is not moving in the minds of a CEO or whatever, that you need to ship faster. So what did we do? We invented Agile, which is not per se wrong, right? Like I also grew up in an industry where we were trying to put something in a PRD or these shitty documents. I know you've also written those.
I've written a lot of them.
So that shit did not work. I get it. That's totally fine. But the problem is not that the car needs to go faster. The problem is that the car constantly goes into the wrong direction.
Yes.
And by making it constantly faster, it also requires so much maintenance that you're constantly busy with maintenance around it, right? So I actually do not think that the majority gain of efficiency when it comes to AI, like for the developers, is actually on the developer side themselves.
Yeah.
I mean, you can do amazing stuff, right? So like, don't get me wrong, also with AI Copilot and all that, it's all good. But I think the majority here is really like more on the product managers and the designers, so they do not have to go for every shit to the engineers, and the same for the marketers as well. They can finally do stuff themselves. How many companies have you sat in where they talk about, well, marketing announced a new website and now they're going to get now budget and some resources from engineering, and then these guys never have time.
Yep.
We've had CMSs, headless, all of them. And it never happens. So maybe that is now being solved.
Yep.
I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. And when I say this, like efficiency gains, I think with the developers and stuff like that, it's that key point that I said, like the value out to customers. Like if we're not validating, and here's where I think a downfall of AI will be. If we're not validating things like we talk about in good product management all day, the build trap, right? Doesn't matter how fast developers go, whether we're using Scrum or we're using AI efficiency for it, like we're still shipping a bunch of crap out there that's not doing anything for anybody. So that's where I'm worried that things will go off the rails. And this makes me a little bit excited about some of the AI developments in the product space and product ops space, because it's allowing us to keep on top of customer feedback faster. It's allowing us to like get data faster and be able to synthesize it a little bit faster. So I'm getting really excited about that. So we'll talk about that in a minute. But I do think there's this caveat, like with Lovable, Bolt, all of these things, which are super exciting. I love playing with them. I think one, if we think that we can build a whole company off of that, we're mistaken, right? We can totally get a proof of concept into the ether and test it. And that's what we should be doing, right? Testing it, getting the feedback, making sure it works. But then we're going to have to rebuild it, re-architect it, because they write way too much code in that. It's a very complicated code too. So it's not elegant. It will be a lot to maintain if we're just shipping out shitty code again. And on the other side of that too, is if we think that now that it's so cheap, let's say to code, right? Or we could have a product manager just build a prototype themselves and get it out there, which is what they should be doing. We could be just, if we're never deleting, which a lot of people don't, right? Or testing it and throwing it away, we could just be piling on a bunch of crap, right? I worry about that. I worry about people skipping the customer research part, the deeply understanding your customers part that we just talked about, which is critical to actually succeed in product strategy, right? And just going right to the code because they say it's cheaper to put an idea in front of people than it is to go talk to people. And that's wrong. And that I could totally see happen.
I have a name for that. I call these the spaghetti founders. The spaghetti founders think that throwing spaghetti onto the wall, well, if you have technology to throw more spaghetti on the wall is now on menu again, right? So like you're throwing so much crap at the wall that you see what's going to stick. Like if you just increase the cadence, it's going to be fine. But it goes to the same kind of problem as before.
Yeah.
You know what? I've been actually thinking about this. So I 100% agree with you on everything that you said, also like on Lovable and all these tools. And I think they are actually amazing. If I look right now on what I use it in a daily work as a CPO or like an interim, whatever, like as a growth advisor, where AI lives up to the hype. It is not the stuff that people talk about. So I can tell you for certain that since for a year, I would say, I have not written a single SQL statement from start to beginning myself. It is that good to query data for me as long as I train it on the data structure, like what the fields mean and so forth. That's the first thing. The second thing, it is really good at analyzing existing code and explaining it back to me what a specific section means. Because I'm not an engineer anymore, but I do understand with some help like what something does. So that's also very helpful. And the third thing is like summarizing big walls of text and crap with some references. So all of this is kind of fine. So I actually do think AI is going to be absolutely amazing on the security space.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about Lovable here, right? Because Lovable is creating, as you said, code that is rife with injection problems and whatever. But I think AI is really good in like summarizing and finding attack vectors for actual code, to make it more safe. So there's some really cool stuff happening in there as well. But here's a question to you, because I know you're also quite passionate about analytics, right? So product analytics, right? Like analyzing data stacks and so forth. So we had for 5 to 6 years, I see constantly analytics products pop up that promise to you that they can analyze insights. For instance, hey, Melissa, the retention is down in this particular product. And in the next 2 months, we're going to project this and this is happening. You should include it into your product strategy. Have you seen any of these projects or products right now that actually came to fruition that are working in the way that they have been advertised?
That's a good question. I don't know. I know there are great analytics products out there that help you if you're analyzing it. I think it's hard without the context that analytics products have about your customers, let's say.
Yeah.
Like to basically say, hey, you should be prioritizing retention right now. But also you'd have to understand it's like looking at a document, right? And being like, oh, we don't have a churn problem because churn is pretty low. right? But then if you look at the pipeline of a sales coming in and the sales are very low too, you're like, you're going to have a churn problem because now we're not getting people in, right? If you don't have that context type thing, you don't know what you're looking at, it's really hard to predict what's going to happen or where you should prioritize. So in that space, I don't think analytics tools, these types of tools could replace a product leader making some of these judgment calls, right? I do think they're good at highlighting where there might be issues, right? And I think that's how we have to treat analytics tools. They're good signals to say like, hey, you might want to look at this because it's changed, right? We notice retention dropped. Okay, let me look into it. Why did retention drop? Like I'll drill down on the data, surface up what you think it might be. But as product managers, we have to look at it and just say, do we believe this? Or is there other reasons that this, product is not aware of? And that's where I think, unless like you had the view of absolutely everything, like the market, the customers, the sales calls, the like customer support tickets, the user research, the data, like all of that, like you couldn't just ask an analytics tool to spit that back out.
Yeah, but this is driving me absolutely crazy. So let's say you're asking usually an AI or any LLM, and I do not know of anyone that has solved this problem, but like, let's say you ask for like, hey, what is the worst retention problem that we have? First of all, the AI is not capable of knowing what it doesn't know, exactly for the reason that you said. Like, so you're 100% on point. But my problem is right now, are we the last generation of people who have actually dug into data that can also verify it?
That too.
What I mean with that is, it will give you an answer, even if it's not confident for some reason. And it will tell you, well, that's the problem. And then I'm going to ask, and then I'm going to check. And I'm like, where did you hallucinate these numbers from?
Yeah.
I have no idea where this came from. And this happened to me quite a few times with Perplexity, which I highly regard. The R1 model is extremely good. For an article, it told me about, hey, you're going to lose 43% of your customers in this particular step. And I'm like, where did you come up with this number? This is not true. So I asked for the sources. I could not find anything.
Yep.
And you know what's dangerous in a company, right? A product leader that is confident about a number that nobody else can check.
Exactly.
So,
no, and I agree. I think people will rely on AI making judgment calls for them. And I don't think you can do that. Like you can't use it in that way. Teresa Torres started like a LinkedIn thread about this the other day. And I think it's right. I'm very excited. So I'm caveat, like I'm excited about LLMs on top of customer feedback because it can summarize customer feedback, get it faster to us and like help surface up problems. But what a lot of people are doing that she was kind of tracking was they're feeding all their customer research and stuff into the LLMs and like maybe customer research they didn't even do, right? And then asking them to summarize it and then making judgment calls based off what the AI comes back, but not using it as a gut check, right? I've done this with like surveys before as well, where I've fed like results through and I'm like, categorize this or tell me what the summary is. And I'll look into it and it'll make judgment calls on it. But then I'm like, no, it didn't have all the context I did because I've talked to the people in real life. So like, I know what the quotes were. I know what like the statements were. And you have to go back and kind of like add on your own lens to it, right? It's good to kind of gut check and to help summarize, but you also have to have enough knowledge to go back and be like, that's not really what I meant. Like they kind of summarized this wrong. Like this isn't quite accurate. And without that double checking, right, I think we can get into a lot of trouble. So I think of a lot of this summarization, especially LLMs and like customer research is great. It's very much like the data we were talking about, right? It's a signal. And it's a signal of like, let me go dig into that and see what's going on here because it could be important. But you can't just say like, we're going to reprioritize the roadmap because this LLM looked at all of our customer support tickets and it said that this thing was the highest problem for us. Because like, what if it was the highest problem for like a segment of users that we don't really care about and they're churning anyway?
Yeah, I am fascinated. I don't know where this is going to end. I mean, I'm not running out of work for the next couple of years, so that's kind of nice.
I don't think any of us are, but I think people are scared of that. But like, I do think there's so much nuance and so many things to learn still about AI, and it's not perfect. It's exciting. I love that it makes some of my job so much faster and so much easier to get things, out the door and to be able to provide more value. But like, if you don't have that deep insight on it and that careful skepticism, healthy skepticism of it, right, you can get into trouble.
I agree. And I think most of the stuff that actually works is a summarization of more data into a kind of smaller context, but you cannot expect it to derive new insights of something that just simply does not exist unless it is hard numbers, like, hey, how many people in this particular data set said this particular thing, right? So
yeah. It made me think of like an example too. We were talking about a long time ago, like before all these LLMs, oh my God, almost 8 years ago, like in healthcare, when we were looking at algorithms, building a lot more powerful algorithms, there was a point where I remember having a conversation like at this EHR system, and we were like having a conversation about, hey, if we know everybody's like health records, their vitals, all of this information, like we could actually make predictions on what's wrong with them, right? And it got into like, how far do you go with that, right? Because a doctor is a trained expert in those things, and they can observe a patient, right, in a way that you can't when they're sitting in front of you, right? And there may be some symptoms they didn't self-report. There's some of these things that are there. So it's like a lot of people, if you think about it in isolation of the context, you're like, oh, AI can just solve this problem really easily. We'll tell people what's wrong with them. I know a lot of people feed their stuff through ChatGPT, and it tells them what's wrong with them too. But it's like, where's the line, right, between where we should be making recommendations and where we do need an expert opinion on top of it, right? And like, where can it help and where does it just go too far, right? And it can actually hurt. And I think that's going to be a very careful balance about how we solve those problems going forward. And in the end, like in that case, we were like, we can't do that. We can make signals to like help alert doctors for what looks off, right? But they're going to have to make a judgment call based on their expertise because they have a lot more information than we possibly could in a system.
There's a very big slippery slope in there as well. And I can give you a very specific example as well for why this is a problem. So AI can only work on the data that it has. And this is then becoming the absolute truth that it acts in it. If you are a woman that takes a mammography or, because you're feeling like, you have a lump or anything, and you go and do that particular test in the old world, whatever, there's a specific percentage of chance that, you have a tumor and so forth. So you might think that, oh, everybody that is getting checked has now the same kind of percentage of chance that it happens. But this is a statistical fallacy because only women get actually sent to that have probably been to the doctor and also have a specific history. So the fact of you getting checked is now putting you at a bigger risk that you're going to get surgery for something that you do not actually need just because you got checked out. So when you make the checking more accessible, for instance, you're starting to change the entire thing again.
Yep.
And that is where I think it's called like when the observer is kind of changing the equation at the end. And I don't know whether this example does make sense, but that is a very real consequence of AI not having a correct picture of reality because what we're giving it is already kind of a skewed version of it.
Yeah, there was a big example here too in healthcare. Healthcare is like rife with all these examples. There's been a lot of AI issues in the United States with it. One was, it was in the news. There was a company that was creating a risk score for like opioid abuse. And I had my like MBA students use this as a case study where we went through and we were like, where is the failure here? Was it on the technology? Was it on the design? Was it on like the support around it or like the system, right? And we looked through, and I think there's great ethics conversations in this. But what was happening was people were being denied care because they were being flagged as a high risk for abusing opioids. So like when a woman went to a hospital, it was in this article, to get treatment, she had been in an accident, they wouldn't give her the medicine because she had been flagged in the system. She found out later, they wouldn't tell her this, as like an opioid abuser. And she's like, what the hell? Like, why? And when she goes back into it, she researches it, goes all the way through. And like her doctors canceled her care. Her like, her primary care doctor was like, I can't care for you anymore. We won't accept you at hospitals. We won't do this because it looked like she was a drug abuser. When she goes back into it, it was because she was getting pain medication filled for her dog under her name. And it was like, she never took it, but she had a 13-year-old dog that was big and took prescription medicine, and all goes under your name. I just got my prescription filled for my dog under my name. And nobody was taking that into account, right? And because of that, it like ruined her whole like life, basically being able to get the care. And people are like, it's a system, it's the algorithm. I'm like, to me, healthcare system in the US is a huge issue. And the fact that this is happening is a big issue too. Yep. But also like, who made that algorithm? Right? Like who made that algorithm not knowing that you get pet prescriptions also filled through your...
I think whenever you automate stuff, you cannot forget that you're affecting individuals. And for that individual, it's going to change everything. A more mundane thing is that I cannot advertise my episode with CJ Gustafson about the recession because it said that it has shocking content in it. I'm not going to reach anyone from YouTube to kind of solve that. So that's just happening. So for me, that's not a big issue, right? But like, if I'm getting rejected for something like this, then in the future where people are also checked automatically by healthcare professionals, we'll also get false flags or like false positives in that sense. So I'm 100% with you there. Okay, Melissa, we've been going on for 5 hours. I just checked the clock. Do you want people to contact you? Or like if you're an AI model, like how should they get in contact with the real Melissa?
Yeah, you can get in contact with me at LinkedIn is the best way. So find me on LinkedIn, drop me a line, or you can go to my website at productslabs.com or melissaperri.com, and there's a contact form there. So we also launched a new course on Product Institute and product strategy. So if anybody wants to learn how to build robust product strategies and do a lot of that data analysis I was talking about on the current state. It's all self-paced at productinstitute.com. It's called Mastering Product Strategy. There's an AI component in there where we do little activities with you on AI now so that you can actually practice building product strategies for a fictitious company. So I'm also using it, which is exciting. But yeah, I'm excited about solving these problems. So reach out.
That sounds very good. And if you want Melissa to do your books with QuickBooks, do send her a message.
Don't reach out. Don't call me. Mm-mm.
And that's the end of this episode. Thank you so much for listening to The Product Tea with Leah. If you don't have enough yet, you can subscribe to my podcast right now on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or you can head to my website, leahtarin.com, which is leahtarin.com, where you can find much more of my material or just want to work with me.